Welcome to the Intercessor's Corner, where life's questions and topics are met with biblical truth and spirit-led wisdom. Here's this week's word to fuel and fortify your prayer walk. Today, I want to talk about Thanksgiving, but not in the traditional sense. I want to come from the slant where thankfulness changes everything. And the scripture I want to use to ground this conversation today comes from Philippians 4:6, where the scripture tells us, do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your request to God. Now, I want to open this conversation up by saying that when Paul wrote these words, he wasn't actually sitting in comfort or ease. In fact, it was just the opposite. He was sitting in a prison cell for preaching the gospel. And yet he tells us not to be anxious, but instead to pray with thanksgiving. Now, the question would start to arise, why thanksgiving? Why not pray with urgency or with passion or with desperation, which might be things that, depending on the situation, we might actually do? The answer is because thankfulness changes the posture of the heart. Thankfulness rewires the way we see God. The scripture tells us that without faith, it's impossible to please Him. And it's easy to get caught up with what's going on around us. But when we look at the situation from a thankful standpoint, instead of murmuring and complaining, although it could be worse, our thankfulness shifts our focus from what is missing to what has been given. It moves us from fear into trust. A lot of times when we're going through things, we panic because we can't figure it out, or we want to take care of it ourselves, or maybe we're used to being in control. But maybe consider that God has allowed us to be in that situation so that we can trust Him and be reminded that He's our source. And when we put our faith in Him, it casts out fear. It also reminds us that God has already shown Himself faithful. I often say, if God heals you, delivers you, brings you out once, He can do it again. And that same God who carried us before, He'll do it again, because He's not a one and done. He understands that we're going to continuously have things that happen in our life, and He's going to continually be there to bring us out and deliver us. Then there's the idea that thankfulness doesn't deny the reality of our situation. I think sometimes that when we give our lives over to God, we are under the false notion that everything's going to be perfect and everything is going to be rosy. In fact, it's just the opposite. You're going to go through whether you have God in your life or not. The idea or the challenge would be, who are you going to run to when your back is up against the wall? The world will tell you that you need to lean to your own understanding. But the scripture says, in all your ways acknowledge God, because He will direct and guide your path. And it's not to say that what you're going through isn't horrible. It might be absolutely terrifying, horrible, and beyond belief. But knowing that God has you is what makes all the difference. The scripture tells us man is born of a woman and full of trouble. So it's not that we're going to get out of it. It's just that God is there with us. And when we choose to be thankful, our thankfulness aligns us with the reality of God's ability. It says, God, I'm going to put my trust in you and not in the situation, regardless of what the situation looks like. When we come before God with thanksgiving, what we're actually saying with our heart posture is, You've been faithful before, and I trust you now. You've made a way before, and you can do it again. And even before you answer this prayer, Father, I'm going to choose to thank you because I know you're good. You were good to me before. You're going to be good to me now. So maybe today you're facing something heavy, a decision, a burden, uncertainty about the future. Let's acknowledge that. But instead of asking why, look at it as an opportunity for you to grow closer to God and for him to show himself stronger in your life. And instead of letting anxiety speak louder than your faith, take a moment to pause and thank him. There's power in your praise and in your thanksgiving. Take a moment to thank him for what he's already done. Take a moment to thank him for what he's doing in ways you cannot see. And take a moment and know that he listens, he cares, and he answers. You don't get to choose what you go through. You choose how you go through it. And you don't get to choose how long it takes, but you can lighten the load of the weight by giving him the thanksgiving and praise that's due him for bringing you out ahead of time. And remember, Thanksgiving isn't something that you sprinkle on top of prayer. Thanksgiving is what gives your prayer its strength. Thank you for joining me in the Intercessor's Corner. If today's word encouraged you, be sure to subscribe to Divine's podcast so you'll always be fueled for your weekly prayer walk.